In today's video, I will be taking a look at another hypothetical 2024 presidential election matchup between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. Now, obviously, these are the two GOP primary frontrunners in their primary elections. Most people speculate that Ron DeSantis is going to beat Donald Trump, and pollsters and opinion polls seemingly suggest that. However, in a presidential matchup, who will actually win the election? In today's video, I will find out. Now, I'm not going to do the primary map because it is very complicated, so I'm just going to do this simpler version, which is basically the presidential election map, as we are not really sure about how many delegates each state will actually have. So I'm going to start off by going from Washington all the way to the state of Maine. So first off, in the state of Washington, and I think Ron DeSantis is going to win because I think that in many more rural states, those are states that Trump will likely do better in, while Ron DeSantis could do better in the liberal states, if this was to be a presidential matchup. So for the state of Washington, I'll give it to Ron DeSantis by a likely margin. Oregon, it's a very progressive state. Trump is definitely not going to do well there, so I'm going to give it to Ron DeSantis as well. So for the state of California, it's a very large state, but it's a state that is very democratic for the most part. There are some rural areas that are probably going to vote for Donald Trump, but in the end, Ron DeSantis definitely is also favored in the state of California. Nevada, I think Trump actually did pretty well in that state, so I'm going to give it to Trump by a narrow margin. Arizona is definitely a state that Ron DeSantis could do better in because this is definitely the state that would vote for someone like McCain, not someone like Trump or any pro-Trump Republican. So for the state of Alaska here, Alaska, I'm assuming will vote for DeSantis, given that Trump did not do very well for a Republican in that state in like a very long time. Hawaii, however, did actually trend to Donald Trump in the 2020 general election. So I'm going to give that state to Trump by a narrow margin. Utah is a state that I do not think Trump will actually do well in, even though it's a rural state, because it's a state that has Mitt Romney as a senator from that state, and really some of those Mormon voters might not actually support Trump, so I'm going to give it to Ron DeSantis. Now, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, these are definitely states in the Great Plains area. These are states that are heavily rural and heavily Republican. These states will likely support Trump, though the state of Montana could be by a more narrow margin. Now for the 2nd District of Nebraska, I think I'm going to give it to Ron DeSantis. Trump did very poorly there in 2020, so I'm going to give the district to Ron DeSantis. In the 3rd District, definitely going to support Donald Trump. The 1st District, I'm assuming it will also support Trump by a lean margin. And for the Nebraska statewide vote, I'm going to give it to Trump by a likely margin. I don't think this should be that surprising considering the fact that these rural states typically do support Trump, while the more urbanized areas are typically going to favor Ron DeSantis. Now, DeSantis is definitely going to win Colorado. I do not doubt that because it's definitely a very liberal state and it's a very urbanized state. It's a very progressive state, but for the state of New Mexico, could be closer, but I think Ron DeSantis is still favored. Now for the state of Kansas. Kansas is not necessarily a state that's that rural. It has a lot of like cities that if Ron DeSantis could turn out enough voters, he could win the state. However, again, it's still a rural state, so I'm going to give it to Donald Trump. Oklahoma, a very rural state as well, going to go for the former president. Now, Texas is a more tricky one. On one side of the argument, I can definitely see, I would say, Ron DeSantis winning because it's a state that's trending Democratic and it is a state that has a lot of large cities. However, on the other side, Trump will definitely get a lot of the support in the rural areas. After all, many Democrats are not going to vote for Ron DeSantis. So, after all, I'm just going to give the state to Trump. It's going to be a very close one, but I'm just going to give it to Trump. Now, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee. These are southern states that are heavily favoring Donald Trump. Mississippi could be a likely margin, but the other states are safe margins for the former president. Florida, although it is technically the state that Trump lives right now and is registered to vote in, it's still a state that Ron DeSantis is the governor of that state. So I'm going to give it to Ron DeSantis by a lean margin. Georgia should also go to Ron DeSantis, given how poorly Trump did in some of the Atlanta metro area, and some of the he did well in some of the rural areas, but that's just not going to be enough. So for the state of South Carolina, I still think it's going to back Trump by a very narrow margin. It has a pretty large black population, but it's still probably going to back Trump. Now for the state of North Carolina, this is another tricky one. There's a lot of rural voters in the state of North Carolina that's likely going to support Donald Trump. However, there's still a lot of suburban voters that are registered as Republican that will definitely support Ron DeSantis. At the end of the day, I'm just going to give the state narrowly towards Donald Trump. So, if you look at the electoral vote count, with more than half of the electoral votes officially adjudicated, you can see that this is a very close race. Ron DeSantis at 156 and Donald Trump at 149. Now for Trump, he has some other safe states for him, or likely states. The states of Missouri, Indiana, these are states that are definitely very rural, and those states are going to support the former president. However, Kentucky and West Virginia are going to be safe. These are states that really do support candidates like Trump, who are extremely MAGA, someone who is extremely, American first, and that's going to give Trump a boost in the electoral vote count. Now for Ron DeSantis, he's definitely going to win some of the liberal states. Virginia, it's a state that trended away from the former president, going to be lean for Ron DeSantis. The District of Columbia, there's not many Trump voters in that state, definitely safe for Ron DeSantis. Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont are definitely states that do lean Democratic, and Democratic-leaning states definitely do favor Ron DeSantis. Some of the margins could be closer because there's still a lot of Trump voters, and there's a lot of Democrats that are not going to vote for DeSantis. Still, these states are definitely going to go for Ron DeSantis. Now, let's go to Rust Belt. The Rust Belt is definitely an area that favors the former president, so he should be able to catch up his lead. Now, Iowa and Ohio, these are states that Donald Trump could do very well in, and those are states I'm going to give to the former president. The state of Minnesota, I would say that will go to Ron DeSantis by a narrow margin, considering that Democrats have a very strong grip on the state. It's a very close state, but Democrats still have a very strong grip. Now for the state of Illinois as well, it's a lean Democratic state. Again, there's a lot of rural areas, but those areas are just not large enough for Trump to actually win the state. Now I think Trump will win Wisconsin. It's a state that's made to be more Republican-leaning because of the former president. Similarly, in the state of Michigan, it's a red trending state, largely thanks to Donald Trump. So as you can see right now, this is a very close election. 253 for Ron DeSantis, 230 for Donald Trump. Now, the state of Pennsylvania here, this is a very close one. The state of New York, though, I will give it to Trump because he's a businessman from that state. And although this is a heavily Democratic state, I think Trump could actually win the state. And going to the state of New Hampshire here, I think Ron DeSantis still will win because it is in the New England territory, which will favor Ron DeSantis. So you can see the electoral vote is practically tied, and I will give Ron DeSantis Maine's first congressional district, which officially ties the electoral vote count. I think Trump could narrowly win Nebraska's 2nd district, considering how well he did there in 2020. That large vote, though, I think I'll give it to Ron DeSantis, given that that district has a significantly higher turnout than the Maine's 2nd congressional district. So, for the state of Pennsylvania, it's Biden's home state. I actually think Ron DeSantis could win this Rust Belt state because it's bordering states like Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey, which are definitely going to vote for Ron DeSantis. Furthermore, it's a state that's not trending Republican by as much, thus I'll give it to DeSantis, and end up giving Ron DeSantis a narrow lead over Donald Trump. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.